So, we covered the Song of Moses and the Song of Miriam last week. Now we move on to the bitter waters of Mara, the bitter waters made sweet. So it says, so Moses in Exodus 15, verse 22, Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea. Then they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Now, when they came to Mara, they could not drink the waters of Mara, for they were bitter. Therefore, the name of it was called Mara, which is bitter. And the people complained against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? So he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. When he cast it into the waters were made sweet. There he made a statute and an ordinance for them. And he tested them and said, if you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his sight, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases on you, which I've brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees. So they camped there by the waters. So, got a couple things in here we should be familiar with. For instance, well, let's see here. How do I work through this? I'll start and I'll work my way backwards. So, good morning all from Kona. Must be nice, Steve. Good morning, Steve and Arla. It says that I am the Lord who heals you. Jehovah Rapha, or Yahweh Rapha, however you want to say it, right? But Rapha, who heals you. And that's what God does. He heals us. That's kind of the name of his game. He likes to heal his kids. He makes us whole. He restores us back to the way we were supposed to be. So he is our healer. I'll put none of these diseases on you, which I brought on the Egyptians. That was the name of a popular book, I think in the 70s, None of These Diseases. And, it actually just goes through and talks about some of the logic between, or the logic of God's law and the rules that they placed on the Israelites, and how the pork and all that other stuff, like it really actually had a place back then on cleanliness and keeping them away from disease. And you think about it, between pigs and certain seafoods, you have two of the animal groups where you are most likely to get sick and diseased from. And so definitely the dietary laws had a practical place, among other things. From them being a set apart people, that he wanted the Jewish people to be set apart, there were some practical sides to those rules as well. When we look at it today, the practical side isn't quite there as much. Some people still don't like pigs because they're dirty animals, or they don't like seafood because they don't like seafood. And preference is one thing, right? But to say that there's any other kind of benefit from remaining on those dietary laws, well, at least you're lacking spiritual ground to stand on. I like the way Joe Focht put it. If you think you're holier by not eating pig, you're full of baloney. So there we have all that. Now, we back up a little more, though. Now, there's the bitter springs of Mara, the bitter waters of Mara. And there's typology all through the Old Testament. And some types are given to us. We are told that passing through the Red Sea is a type of baptism. And we are told that the rock of Horeb, coming up very soon, that they're going to strike 2 chapters away, I think. That's a picture of Christ, that he was struck and that Moses gets in big trouble for striking him again because Jesus was struck once and never has to be struck again. And so there's types that we're told of, but there's a whole lot more than that. Now, a type is something that has an antitype. This is something I didn't always get, but you find that actually Peter uses the word antitype, speaking of the flood and baptism. And what it is a type, it's symbolic of something specific. And it's not just a general symbolism, because symbolism is a more broader term, but a type has an antitype. So going into the Red Sea and coming out is the type of the antitype, baptism. The rock which is struck, which brings forth living water, is the type of the antitype, Jesus Christ, who is struck, and from him comes the living water. So type, antitype. We don't see the word antitype very much, but it's there. And so more types, they're all there. And if you listen to Bible teachers and whatnot, they'll often show you these types that we didn't even realize were there. And I heard some really cool ones recently. What was it? Someone just was showing me, like, doesn't this look like that? And this look like that? And you're like, yeah, it does. That's kind of cool. I never thought about it that way. And someone was just asking me, he's like, do you see a problem with this type? And I'm like, no, I mean, it's a type. You don't come up with new doctrine from types. You don't make new rules from types. They're just kind of cool to see, like, wow, look how you see this thing. And so it's just worth noting that they have bitter water, okay? And they're thirsty. And it ends up being a tree. And he casts it into the middle of the waters. And it's funny that it's like, not like a branch or a tree, a whole tree. And that tree turned the bitter waters sweet. Now, you probably are familiar that in the New Testament, right, we know Jesus was crucified on a cross, but Peter and others synonymously, Paul, talk about him being hanged on a tree. And that was like synonymous to them. They considered it like a tree. And they quote the Old Testament, curses anyone who's hanged on a tree. And so what we find is, a tree is a picture, a type of the cross. It's interesting. I just have a funny note in my Bible here. It says, he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. And my note is, but the tree was always there. Isn't that true? It's not like a tree grew when he cried out to the Lord. I mean, the tree was there the whole time. Now, the problem is that Moses didn't realize that the tree was what he was looking for the entire time. And that this tree was able to make those bitter waters sweet. And it's true for our friends, for our family, for so many people, how they've all grown up around the tree. They've seen it on church buildings, on necklaces. We've all heard the stories about Jesus. And yet, many people don't realize that it's the very thing that they've always been looking for to make those bitter waters sweet. Another saying I like is that it is God's job to bring men to Christ, that work of salvation. But it is man's job to bring Christ to men. And so it's just that reminder that people have seen the cross, they've seen this, they've seen that, but we're the ones who are supposed to be bringing the cross to them, to show them, this is what you've been looking for, this is what you've been waiting for. I want to share a story from a lady in our church. Recently, we were talking just about her conversion story and process. And I told her, I was like, it's sad to hear her story a little, because it's exactly what I keep telling people. She knew she needed to seek God. And so she started going to the Catholic Church because that's what she knew. But something didn't feel like there was something missing. And so, next thing you know, a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses invite her to church. And she goes because she wants to find God. And here are people trying to, here's God. So she goes. They don't have crosses at their church, though. So, but something doesn't feel right. And then she says, next thing she knows, she saw them at like the parking lot or whatever, walking. And then later, a couple of Mormons, or no, they came to the door, and then a couple of the Mormon girl missionaries came and invited her. So she goes to the Mormon church. And it wasn't until she watched American Gospel that it was like, no, that's what I'm looking for. But she had to keep looking and wait. Like, she had to get past like 3 cults. Okay, I don't call them the Roman Catholics a cult. They got issues, but they're not a cult. But look what she had to get to before finally she got the real gospel message. And it's only because we aren't bringing Christ to men the way we ought to. And there are false groups and cults with false gospels, which Paul, as we read in Galatians at our church recently, right? Man, they're to be damned, anathema, those who are preaching and bringing false gospels. It's a big deal, but they're the ones who are out sharing, and the catch is there are people who are hungry for the cross. They're literally at home waiting, wondering, where should I go? And people are coming to their door, bringing a deceptive, looks kind of similar false gospel. And they're beating us to all these people. And so, just an encouragement. The cross, the tree that makes the bitter waters sweet. That's the message people want to hear. They just need to find some messengers. Behold, the harvest is plenty. It's just the messengers that are few. Pray the Lord of the harvest that he'd find some more messengers and people who will just continually be bringing out Jesus in their day-to-day walk, in their day-to-day life. And even the most simple and mundane of things I can think of is like carrying around a stack of church invite cards and just making it a habit. Here, take that, and just walking away. Don't have to be trained in evangelism. Don't have to, just inviting people to church and telling people about Jesus and making it normal again to share the gospel. There have been seasons in church history, which we call revivals, where it's just normal to talk about Jesus to strangers and people who may be searching and seeking for him. And so let's bring back normal. Let's bring back the old normal, the really old normal. And hopefully we'll see some great transformation take place. So that's what I got from you. We get into manna and the bread from heaven tomorrow. These next few chapters of Exodus are really good chapters. So hope you stick with 645 this week, and we'll see if it sticks. God bless you guys. Share the gospel. You could even just hit the share button. I hear they have one of those at the bottom of this video. I mean, God's trying to make it really easy for you. I swear, he's doing all he can to make your job easy. So try not to kick against the goads, eh? There you go. Walk around with a Revival Church mug. That helps too. God bless you guys. See you around.